Sometimes it can be a super cool challenge to recreate a song you really like on just one single synthesizer, which is what I did recently with the Aphex Twin song Tha, or T-H-A. I never really know how to pronounce it correctly, but I liked it so much that I shared a little performance video, and I also wanted to share with you how to create the sound. So it's more about the sound design, because you just can learn so much from analyzing music you like. Of course, I created all the sounds on my Nordrum 3P, and if you're using something else, I'll try to make it comprehensive for you still. So I want to explain the logic behind the sounds, and also I'm going to give you some small examples inside Ableton Live. My name is Janis, by the way, and the song starts with this super cool noise pattern. And what I like so much about this part is that it's using some resonant noise, because if you increase the resonance a lot, you start hearing some actual tones, although you're just creating noise. So I'm going to start on pad 2. We only want to have noise, so I increase this all the way to the max. We also want to take out the filter envelope, because we don't want to have this type of movement. Because if we now choose a low-pass filter and L2 is already selected, I often prefer L2, and increase the resonance to a high value. So the maximum is 20, and I think 18 was cool for me here. It's not exactly a tone, but it sounds way more tony and mysterious compared to the noise without any resonance. Because the resonance brings in this kind of singing note that I like so much. And for the first pad, I ended up at the value of 14. I also chose a different decay because it's kind of short if you listen to the original. So I actually selected the gate mode, which is one I rarely use. And then you can copy the sound of pad 2 to pad 1 and basically change the tuning by reducing the filter frequency. And actually the second noise has also a longer decay. So it sounds like a kind of melody. Actually, that's too long. Let's pick a normal envelope. Something like this. And actually, you can copy pad 2 also to pad 3. Pad 3 has the same tone, but just a little longer. I also created some simple example using analog and Ableton, because you can see the oscillators are deselected, there's only noise. I brought down the color, so there's some filtering happening already. Then for the filter, it's again important that you deselect or that you don't use the envelope, because this movement doesn't really sound so great with this effect, although maybe for another type of sound, but here I felt like without the envelope it's better. You also want to enable keyboard tracking, because this actually means that the tones you play, for example, with the keyboard, create a different type of tone. So if I actually walk up the keyboard here, almost sounds like a scale, and it's actually kind of fun. There's quite a good amount of reverb. Actually, the reverb is really important here, which is why we can check it now. I was using some Valhalla vintage verb, because the reverb is really audible, and it also sounds a bit messy, which I like a lot personally. So here I use the dirty hall setting, which is something that gives me more modulation, that doesn't sound so clean, which is actually what I want here. In 80 settings, it's a long one, so I actually chose 5.5 seconds for a decay time, which is really long. Some pre-delay. And then often at reverb plugins, you have some preset that cuts out the high frequencies. And the high frequencies are really important here, because they create this kind of cool foley that you hear on top, like the click from the kick drum, for example, and also the noise. They all have some high frequency content that sounds really interesting when it reverberates. And that's why, for example, the high cut is all the way up to the max. Sometimes it's somewhere here, for example. And also the high shelf damping is deselected, because usually it's also maybe taking off like 12 dB or something, starting at maybe like 6000 Hertz. So I leave all the high frequency content in, which is maybe the most important thing here. Those other settings are not so important. Maybe like the modulation is cool. Like if you can add some modulation, it also adds something to the messiness. And also one more thing, on the master, I have some simple bus compressor, just tucking things together. That's nothing fancy here. But I also use this tape plugin, because right from the beginning, I felt like creating this song benefited from having this lo-fi vibe, so it doesn't sound as clean as the standard DAW setting. And it makes quite some difference, because if I take it off, it sounds way cleaner. If I take it on, it brings in some dirt. you can hear this high fuzz that I actually enjoy, and also it resonates well with the reverb that also emphasizes a bit the messiness of the high frequencies. So it's this Arturia tape mello-fi plugin. I'm usually really skeptical when it comes to those tape emulation lo-fi plugins, but this one is really fun. Also, the distortion mode isn't really aggressive, so you can add quite some for a natural type of distortion. The kick drum is fairly straightforward. First, let's actually pitch it down to, in my case, 32. I used a simple sine wave, which is here A1, just a standard decay. And then we absolutely need some pitch envelope, or here it's called bend. And the intensity I usually have around 12, unless I want to have it really intensive. And the time is kind of interesting, because if you have it on a slower value, which would be a short decay, it's more like a punchy pitch envelope. But if you increase the time, you make it a little more thumpy. And then there are two parts of noise, like one that just supports the thumpy character, and I'm going to use the noise section for it here. So I increased it a little. I didn't use much. I just used the L2 filter with a little bit of resonance. And again, almost no filter envelope. I use it on the value 1 and open it a little. So you can hear it, but it's too long. And I decreased it, but somehow here I like the L envelope. And there's also some obvious part of noise, which we can do here with the click, because that's the cool thing about the Nord drum, is it basically has two noise generators. And I think I used something of the P modes. Now it sounds really loud, but in order to compensate a little, I added some drive, because kick drums always often benefit from some distortion. And so here I increased it up to 32 because it also glues the sound together, and this way the click isn't as loud anymore. It's more like some molded sound. Next, there's some sound where I have absolutely no idea how to categorize it, because it's some sort of hybrid between a bass or like a sub bass and a percussion instrument, and it creates a cool counter pattern with the kick drum, which is why I want to play both sounds for you now. So there's a sub bass part that I tried to create with a sine wave again, and again we have to tune it lower, of course. I think I used 34 here. For the decay, I choose the L1. The L1 is like a longer decay, and so because this subtone is audible, it's kind of low in the mix, but still kind of audible. I was using the L envelope, and the value I used was actually 22. And actually I remember I also added some bend, but this time I had the time of 1, so very short and a high intensity, though. So it just adds a little click, so it makes the sound a little more percussive, like this bottom part. The noise sounded really resonant to me, so I was again fooling around with high amounts of resonance, and this time actually using the maximum value, but I was using a bandpass filter because somehow I liked it more. So let's bring it in. I think I had it here. I used the same type of envelope, so also L on 22. Something like this. Also a little bit of the click, but this time one of the simple modes. And I was also using some drive. And I think I also had some other mix relationships. So I think the noise was at 50 and the tone I brought down. And I played once more with the reverb, and just notice how the high frequencies of the reverb actually point out those higher parts of those otherwise really bassy sounds. By the way, in case you're a Nord drum 3P user, be known that I just released a new class, which is like some 3-hour deep dive, mostly into sound design, but also into MIDI functionalities for a home studio concept. And I also share some more creative tips with you. And I think after taking the class, you'll have a very good understanding of how the instrument works, and you will feel confident on making your own sounds and music with it. And in case you're interested, just check out the link down below in the description. Next, we have this super beautiful melodic bass type sound. And And it's extremely fun to play this sound on the Nord Drum 3P, while it's also the sound where I had to accept most compromises, because while the melody consists of 6 different pitches, which is perfect for the Nord Drum, I can't play different octaves, because when you listen to the original, you hear those tones used in different octaves sometimes, and also some manipulation of the sound through knobs and filters. So I can't really do it here while I play. But somehow I enjoyed this limitation, because still it's a beautiful sound, and the Nord Drum has some FM section. Actually, before doing anything here, you have to lower the intensity of the filter envelope, or actually the FM modulation intensity, quite a lot. I often use this setting, like opening the filter a tiny bit and just using the value of 1, sometimes 2. And then you can just go through the different spectra settings and check all those beautiful pitches. And I ended up here, but on a way lower pitch. So I think the melody starts at, let me check, 40. Just a little bit of drive, like 12. And also I used the EQ because, again, I wanted to know where nice resonances occur, or if some nice resonances occur. I often use the EQ more as some sort of filter around the value of 12. So it's some mid-range kind of thing. I just play this one note and increase it. I really like this color. I mean, it takes away the bass, but we can again later add it inside the mix. So for now it gets a bit thinner, but I just like this resonance so much that gets created at this particular spot. And now that the sound is set up, we can actually change the pitch per pad. So we have 40, 42, 45, 47, 49, and 52. If you don't play it or drum it yourself, you can also do it with some other type of FM synthesizer. I choose Operator here, and those types of sounds are so extremely fun to make, and there are so many timbres also that you can find. So here, if you have some FM synth, Operator always looks really intimidating, but you have to use a routing where you can modulate one oscillator, because we only need 2 oscillators actually, one that we hear and one that we use for modulation. So the yellow one is the one we hear, and this B one, which is I think it's like green, blue, turquoise, actually turquoise kind of thing, we need for the modulation. And that's actually first only here to A without the modulation, because it's only a sine wave. Actually here I tried to include the octaves. I don't know if it's perfectly transcribed, but somewhere around this. Then I lower actually the level here, because I want to slowly increase it. It has a similar type of envelope, but it doesn't have the sustain. And now and the chorus is important, because this is like higher than here, it's at 0.5. And the chorus is basically like the tuning. In this case, I think it means it's some octave higher. And then it starts sounding so beautiful. Just here you can try so many different things. So now I actually selected some sawtooth wave. It sounds a bit more mild with a sine wave. You get more modulation with like very strong square waves, like this. Also cool. And also if you play with the chorus, you get different textures. A little brighter. Also really beautiful. Now the last sound we have is this beautiful melodic string pad, and it's kind of similar to the bass melodic part, because it's also some FM sound. And on the Nord Drum, playing string sounds is kind of a challenge again, because we only have one type of attack, which means we hit the pad and the sound is there right away. We don't have slow attacks. And for string sounds, especially if you make pads, you almost always use some slow attack. But if you select a decay like this, like a long one with the L setting, you get quite some long tones. This time I'm on F1 again, but at the basic spectra setting. And I have also the similar setting compared to the melodic bass. So like the modulation intensity of 1 and the filter frequency cut off at 4. No bend. And the pitches, I just go quickly through them, 66, 69. This one actually, I don't only need 5 pads, so those two have the same pitch, 71, 73, and 76. And if I'm in this setting, I can again play dynamically. Of course, it's important that you have the setting switched to something that reacts to velocity. And then I can imitate the slow attack through a crescendo. So I almost play some roll, and I start on a low velocity and then I get louder. And that's something really unique about the Nord drum that I love, because, I mean, if there wouldn't be this limitation, I would probably just program the typical string pad, which is totally fine, but this is just something else. But if you would do it inside Ableton, it's actually the similar concept that you see the same kind of routing. Again, the A oscillator with like 650 milliseconds of attack. And the course this time is 3:1. So the ratio is 3:1, kind of a similar level. And the course is slower, so that's also some fun thing to do with FM, that the modulator, so this B oscillator, has some slower attacks, so you hear some more motion within the first 1 or 2 seconds. So let's actually play this string part. The release could be a little longer, I think. Also sounds beautiful. And that's basically what I did for recreating the song with my Nord drum, and I hope you enjoyed this video even if you don't have a Nord drum yourself. If you haven't watched the performance yet, you can do so here, or also check another video here which is more about my live setup and performance with Ableton Live and some electronic drum pad. More links are also down below in the description, and apart from that, I wish you lots of inspiration with whatever it is that you create, and hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!